All right, we're live.
Okay, it's 6:03 on January the 5th. And we are, I'd like to call this, January the 4th. I'd like to call this meeting of Planning and Zoning Commission to order. First order of business is roll call. Tony?
Tony Stein, present.
Dave Bench, present.
Greg Demas, present.
Mike Rhodes, present.
Michael Hall, present.
Okay. And let's move on to the next thing, which is there anyone who has public comments? We're going to open the floor to public comments, if there are any. Is anyone?
We don't have anybody signed up for.
We have nobody signed up for public comments.
Correct.
Okay, so we will not open it up to public. We'll move right on to consent agenda then. And I guess in that regard, we have the the meeting minutes from December 7th, and that's the only thing on. That's it, yeah. That's the only thing that's on the consent agenda. Does anyone have any discussion around the meeting minutes from December 7th? You all had a chance to look at them? We got a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve. Or did
Okay.
somebody already do that?
Okay,
I'll second.
all right. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, those opposed? Okay, we are,
Did we call roll? Did I miss roll
I
call?
did.
Oh, you did? Okay, I must have been walking around.
we're moving. We
Thank
are,
you.
we're just rocking.
Great, okay.
Okay. Move on to the regular agenda, discussion on the proposed amendment to the City of Rolling Wood Code of Ordinances, sections 107, 103, 1073, 10776, related to building projections into required yards in the residential zoning district and the definition of yard. Looks like we have someone who would like to speak to this. Mr. Cox?
Sure, absolutely. Bryce Cox, Dent Navarro, Rocha, Bernal, and Zek. I just wanted to lead off a little bit about what we're looking at this evening, what's changed since last meeting, just to give everybody a quick recap before you start your discussion. What you have before you, and Ashley just handed out a slightly updated version. I apologize. When I prepared the original one, I was working off an older draft where I did not catch the updated yard definition language. So the only difference between what you've been handed out and what was originally in the packet is that, and I believe that Ashley has already updated the packet for our online viewers. So what we did is, this is the item coming back from last meeting. We have updated, pursuant to P&Z's guidance and direction, the projection requirements specifically to allow eaves and roof extensions to project 33% or into the required side yard up to 33%. Eaves and roof extensions to project up to 5 feet in the front and rear yards, required yards. And then all other projections, which are not roofs and eaves, are allowed to project up to 2 feet into any of the required yards. We've captured the exception for habitable space. We talked a lot about that, a little bit about that at the last meeting. And some of the mentions were, walking space or that kind of thing. It's a little difficult for me to code in, so I went with some terms that we'd also talked about at that meeting using habitable space. And then I provided that exception for bay windows, which was also discussed. The 10-foot width is just a number that was given during P&Z. Totally up for discussion. All the numbers kind of are anyways, but we can work through that as y'all discuss as well. And then the last piece of that is the chimney allowance, because the commission wanted to make sure that we would allow chimneys specifically attached to houses to be able to meet that 2-foot encroachment. And so we had to pull it off a little bit because the rest of the encroachments or the rest of the projections are based on overhangs, whereas a chimney is typically going to be attached to the ground, so it's not overhanging, but it's actually encroaching. So we've captured that as well. And I'm here if you've got any questions. Other than that, I'll turn it back over to y'all for your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to open this up to public comment? Okay, is there anyone out there who would like to? Okay, then I'm going to open it up to public comment. It is 6:08.
Hey, Barry Del Cambry, resident or owner of 4 Westgate Circle. I just wanted to kind of speak to the process more so than anything of that we're undertaking here. Having been on the other side of a similar process for the commercial corridor, we did a lot of work from a community planning standpoint of what was required, community input, and really what the entire group wanted our community corridor to look like, which is the area along Bee Cave. What we're undertaking today is much more impactful than what the work that's been done on the community corridor, on the commercial corridor, sorry. This impacts every resident of Rollingwood. I do think that this process should follow something that we've defined as a community, one that was very effective, and I think did a very good job of getting broad support and broad consensus. So as you look to make decisions here, my, I guess, comment would be not to rush through any type of decisions or processes, and really take a step back and look at what the overall impact is going to be for the community to make sure this truly is what the community wants. And I think by following the previous process that we had in place, it was a great blueprint. We had we have members of council that were on that. We had different community groups and individuals that were part of this. I think it did a very good job of representing every cross section of the community. I would encourage you, the council, whomever else is dictating how we kind of go through this process, to follow something similar to that. Because it did work. It worked on defining what we look like from a commercial corridor, what the overall plan of the city looks like. And now this instance, I know this was delivered to y'all, or this was brought up a month ago, but something this impactful really needs to be thoughtful. And not to say that you're not being thoughtful with this, but something that really, I think, affects all of us more so than anything else we'll do in this community, even more so than the bonds and everything else. So I would just urge you to show, maybe not restraint's not the right word, but I think do your due diligence and make sure that full community support and input is provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I guess it's worth mentioning that we are at least talking about a comprehensive plan to do for the residential side. That hasn't kicked off yet, but it has been discussed, and I know that there's a lot of interest in it. Some of the stuff that's being discussed today seems to have come to a head most recently, and is kind of begging attention that we'll get some discussion, hopefully from the public in the next meeting. We'll be sending out meeting notice. Please do, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I think that's a great idea. I mean, the other piece to that, right, is the outliers, or the people that abuse the code. It impacts all of us, right? I mean, I think there's been a consensus of there are certain buildings and things that people have probably a consensus on of what is not desirable or allowed. But again, I think taking it through that community process, like you mentioned, something that is being considered before you enact, I think actually that's just, again, my opinion as a citizen here, that should be the process. It should be something where we have community input versus considering it, because I think as it stands now, you're reviewing the rules and regulations, the code amendments, and then from there it goes to public hearing on February 1st, I believe, right? And then it can be approved or not approved by council subsequently thereafter. So, but what my point is that, and maybe this is beating a dead horse, when we did the comprehensive plan, that was, I think, about an 18-month process versus just a month and a half or 2 months. Something that's impactful needs to be considered. And then I know there was a council member that also sent out some communication regarding maybe a moratorium. We also didn't have a moratorium on anything that we had did when we were looking in the comprehensive plan. So to me, that is also something that is likely detrimental both to livability and also to the kind of prospects of people wanting to live in Rollingwood. That to me, again, is a signal that you're kind of, you're anti-growth or development. And I think there should be rules in place. There should be parameters to make sure that nobody abuses or, pushes our code to limits. I think some of the things actually that you're reviewing are excellent ideas and things that we personally probably should enact. But that shouldn't stop what we're doing. It shouldn't stop people who are looking to build in the neighborhood with good intent to be able to do so. So I think there's a lot of cost involved with that, obviously, as a homeowner who is looking to build selfishly. Any moratorium costs me a lot of money on rent, interest payments, et cetera. I mean, so that is something to, at least as you look through this, and council as well, to consider. There are inherent costs to the residents here. I'm not a developer. I'm not a builder. So anyway, that's all I got.
That's really good input, thank you. All right. Any other input from the audience? Okay. Do we have any discussion here in the commission about what's been presented by Mr. Cox?
I mean, I would say I've spent, since the late long conversation. I think one of the things that everybody wanted was more community input into this. I think a lot of the folks that called in the last meeting, more community input. I think we've gotten a lot more of that. Comments like you just shared, Barry, other people I've talked to, emails that have been exchanged, whatever channel of communication. I would say almost every bit of input that I've gotten has been similar to what we just heard from Barry right there, which is they feel that we're rushing this through, that there are changes for some reason being tried to be pushed through as quickly as possible, and that there hasn't been a good process in place for something that is as important as what we're discussing here. So I think, as a member of this commission who's obviously not actually enacting any sort of changes, my recommendation is we should be listening to the overwhelming majority of what people are saying to us, which is we should be doing this much more thoroughly than a couple planning and zoning meetings and trying to push through changes on city council.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I've had similar conversations. I think that's pretty spot on with a lot of what I've heard. But I guess my perspective is that I actually I kind of like this. I think we worked hard on this last meeting, and I feel like we do need a comprehensive approach, but a small Band-Aid to buy us time to do that right. And avoid some of the worst things that we've seen is not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like if we dig our feet in and don't do anything and support reasonable change, then, maybe we end up with what you don't want, which is a moratorium. So,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I agree 100% that if we're going to go and look at impervious cover and trees and height, then the core aspects of this, then yes, we need a community discussion. But this seems pretty benign and reasonable to me, and I think it's helpful. So I agree with same sentiment, but I don't see a lot of harm in this. I think if somebody's out there, doing anything that deviates from this, then realistically, you could probably change it pretty easily. You could cut down some overhangs and do some things that might be more reasonable. So, but otherwise, yeah, I agree. I'd like to see a more robust process with a lot more input.
I would also just say one more thing, that I wasn't involved a lot with the commercial effort that took place, so I'm probably not really qualified to opine on this, but if we are going to do something more holistic, I think we should challenge ourselves for it not to take 18 months. I know that, I know that was the first time that we did that. I think there was probably a lot of process creation happening, like how do we do this? I would certainly hope that we could cut that down to a significantly less amount of time than 18 months to do something like that. But,
Agreed. I'd only elaborate on process, and the importance of significant changes being well thought out, but also doing it in a comprehensive way, I think is what the process allows for versus, let's take up building height this month and then next month, let's take up impervious coverage. And then, whereas you may make changes that in isolation make a lot of sense for one reason or another, but in totality have unintended consequences that, weren't contemplated with each step along the way. So I think that's another important reason to have a comprehensive, task force or effort. But I agree with Mike too. I think there are holes in, the code needs, significant changes overall, and I think that needs to be thoughtful, but there's also pretty obvious holes, whereas I'm not sure that we would see anybody build an overhang out to the fence line, and that hasn't happened, and I'd be surprised if it did, but it could based on how the code is written right now, and I think that's an obvious fix that needs to happen, and we'll get into height, but I think there's some, you can have discussion around what the core height should or shouldn't be, and I think that's a part of the comprehensive discussion, but, I think there's clearly been some gray area and loopholes that have been taken advantage of that push heights even beyond what I think was intended with the way the code was structured to allow for accommodating, different types of sloping lots.
Ashley, when we put our request out or advertisement for public comment at the next meeting, at the February meeting, how much detail can we put in with regard to, something like this? I guess the issue was last time is that we didn't have enough specificity about what it is we were talking about. We didn't really attract a lot of public input. And if it were possible to get something like this out so people could look at it and say, well, I either love it or I hate it or I don't care, is that possible? Or, it won't fit, I know, onto a postcard, but is there a way
Sure.
to do it?
I think that there is a way to do that. And full disclosure, the postcards are in the works and being mailed because they have to be out 30 days in advance.
Okay.
And so what we try to do on the postcard is keep it to, sections of the code that is going to be possibly amended at the hearing. But what we can do is we can put any other information we need on our website. And so we can put, a news post that says, got the postcard about the next P&Z meeting. Here's the documents that you need to know. And that would be out a lot sooner than the 72 hours before for an agenda posting.
Okay, so that would be on the website, we would be directing people to say something like a document like this, is that?
Right. We'd be able to post this. I'm not 100% sure if where the exact postcard sends them, but it always says if you have questions, call City Hall, and we are always happy to share that information, especially if we already have a draft that's pretty much ready for consideration.
Okay, good.
Is a draft of the postcards already complete where we'd be able to talk about that tonight or take a look at it?
It is out the door, unfortunately. That was kind of the reason with last month why we needed so much clarity on how to post it, because it's a 30-day requirement, which is already before that February meeting. So those are out the door, mailed. I think they had to go out on
We
Saturday.
probably want to look at that process some more too. Yeah. Okay.
Are we able to see what went out? Do you have a copy of that? Or do you-
Yeah.
So I
Do you wanna
want
pull
to
it?
just sort of this is all good discussion, but that none of what you're talking about, like the process and what should be on none of that's on this agenda.
Right.
The only thing on this agenda is a discussion on the code amendment that's before you. So we should probably rein it back in to the agenda item before us. Part of that is like, how long do we want to take, which I was fine with, like how do we want to process this particular thing?
Yeah.
But discussions about what the postcard should look like, what our notice is, none of this is on the agenda for discussion. So we should probably move forward with the agenda item.
All right.
We did talk about a lot of that at the last meeting, so
Yeah.
maybe we didn't include that on this agenda. Maybe we should have done that. But
Well, we spent 3.5 hours banging on this thing last meeting, and what I see here is pretty much the end result of that 3.5 hours. If in fact this is something that can be considered by the public, if they can be pointed to it, I think I'm okay with it. So, with that in mind, do we have a motion?
So there's no action for this item. This is just a discussion. Both of these items are discussion. So it's basically any direction on if anything else needs to be amended, and if we're good with it, then this is what will come back for public hearing next
Fair
month.
enough. Okay, well then, is there anything else that needs to be done to this document?
I read over it. It looks pretty good. I mean, I don't necessarily know that I'm the 33 and the 3rd%, whatever was my choice, but I'm okay with that too. I think this does address kind of an issue. The actual number that comes back, of course, council can come and, you know, recommend something different as well. But it seems like it's addressing the issue at hand.
So just a question, how do we then get the process on an agenda? Is that the next, can we,
So it is already set for public hearing at your next regular meeting. So it's set for the February, I believe that's February 1st for P and Z, and then it's also noticed for City Council on February 15th, the 2 public hearings that are required.
We're just talking about the next time this all happens.
The next
no,
time,
I guess my question was more so that we were saying, hey, we're having all this discussion around process and that we don't feel the process that we took to effectively get to this point was sufficient and that we believe the process needs to be more robust. So do we need to add that as a specific agenda item? Because we were just told that we shouldn't be talking about that because it's
Yeah,
not
you
on the
would,
agenda.
that's right. You would have to
Right.
add it as a specific agenda item for discussion. And,
Okay.
and just as a reminder to everybody, you wouldn't be able to, this body would not be able to unilaterally make changes to
Of
the
course, sure.
process. So
Understood.
it would just be a recommendation to city council.
Okay,
My understanding is that we can't unilaterally make changes to anything.
right.
Yeah,
All we
that-
can do is make recommendations.
Right. Well, I mean, your own processes and procedures unilaterally, you can do a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit.
Right,
But
but-
ordinance wise, that's correct.
Right, yeah, so I want to make sure that we at least come out of this with, I guess an ask from this commission that we have that as an agenda item as soon as possible, because I think we all unanimously agree the process is not working.
Or does it get kicked upstairs and that city council needs to take some input on process? Is it appropriate for us to have a discussion about process?
I see nothing that would prevent you from having that discussion under the law.
With the idea that we would send a recommendation upstairs.
Yes, sir.
All right. Good?
Yeah.
All right. We're probably gonna want that on,
Yeah,
well,
next agenda, please.
yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Could we add that? Okay,
sure.
cool. So is there any more discussion on this item then? Then I guess we can move on.
Do we want to discuss, revisit any of the numbers and, you know, I think we had gone back and forth about width of bay windows versus not specifying a width of bay windows. Do we need to discuss any of that anymore?
This looks as good as any to me.
Okay.
I think since we haven't really gone and done a really comprehensive look, this is addressing kind of the core of it. When we specify everything else, I think we're getting more into the weeds, and I think that certainly needs more input if we're gonna manipulate this a whole lot. I'm okay with it, but just I think it should have more input.
I'm really looking forward to hear what the public has to say. It'd be great. We good?
Good.
All right. Good. Okay, let's move on. All right. We move to discussion on proposed amendment to City Council Code of Ordinances, Section 1073, related to the definition of building height. And I have sent a presentation that was to be included in the packet that I would like to take us through, if I may.
It is, I'm happy to, yeah, let me
Can
pull
we
that
bring
up
that
on the
up?
screen.
Yeah.
Do we have a draft of this ordinance that we talked through last time, or no?
A draft of. Yeah, I wanted to talk about it before we got into the rework that has gone into, okay?
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much.
This is the presentation.
Sorry.
That is the presentation, or at least,
The start of it, yeah.
let's see, hopefully, you've got the most recent up.
That's in the packet.
That's version,
Yeah.
version
All right,
3.
I'll pull it
Yeah.
up there, that's fine.
Okay. I've been busy, and there's just walking around Rowanwood and listening to what people are saying and attending city council meetings and kind of getting a sense for where people's emotional levels are around all this stuff. It seems that rather than just those things that we're talking about, specifically the projections and building heights, that there's a little bit more to it. My sense is that people in Roywood don't want houses that are overwhelming the space on which they're built, nor do they want them overwhelming the neighborhood that are surrounding them. So I think our aim here is to try to bring to the public some discussion that includes some specifics about, in this case, building height. I think we need to be talking not only about measurement of building height, we need to be talking about the height itself. That method that we use for measuring building height, I'd like to at least have a little discussion around roof configuration. I don't know that it's gonna go anywhere, but I'd like to at least call some attention to it. And then maybe a little bit about housekeeping, and that has to do with harmonizing the code, because these definitions show up in too many places, and I think that's a problem. So if we look at residential height comparisons, I've gone through the codes of a variety of various, can you make that larger, because I don't have a copy of this thing and I can't read it. That's lovely. All right, thank you. Okay. Currently, Rowanwood's maximum allowable building height is 35 feet. And if you look around, that's pretty high relative to our neighbors. In fact, I guess there have been in the past pieces from different codes that have been discussed from different parts of Texas. And the only piece that I found that was higher than what we're currently got is Rockwall, which has a 36-foot maximum building height, but it also has a requirement for a pitched roof system. So that changes quite a bit. Westlake Hills currently has a 30-foot maximum. Austin has a 30-foot maximum, but I put down there that it's generally because you can get variances on that if you have the right reasons to, pretty easily, actually. Lakeway has a 32-foot maximum height. And I got to thinking, looking at this, that we are a little bit unique in that Rollingwood is a community of very high value properties with significant relief. And most places that we are doing comparisons in Texas do not have those two characteristics together. Things are either valuable or they have high relief, but the two things, this is kind of unique to Rowanwood. So I thought, well, I'm going to go around the country and just look around for other expensive property that's in a high relief area and see what it is that's in their codes and what kinds of building heights they're using. So I went to Stowe, Vermont. There's not a whole lot there with regard to code, but I do know that their maximum building height is 28 feet. Then I went to Aspen, Colorado, and which was particularly interesting because Aspen has just gone through a significant building code revision. They had put, as a matter of fact, they had had a moratorium on building that was in place from, I think it was October of 2021 until August of 2022. And in that time, they made a lot of changes to their code. And so what I was looking at, there was some pretty fresh stuff. And I've actually had an opportunity to talk with the planner up there and find out, how things are going with the new code. And he says it's going pretty well. He actually called me back today. Anyway, Aspen has a maximum height of 25 feet, and then they have a kind of thing built into their code that with different kinds of pitches on pitched roofs, that building height slides a little bit. But it was an interesting approach to it, and I think that there might be other things in the Aspen code that we might want to look at in the long run. It's pretty well done. Yes, thank you. Now, this graphic that's on the right here, that's actually from Kevin Glasheen from the most recent city council meeting, where he talks about what our current code says, and rightfully so, because we say that our building height maximum is actually 35 feet, but given the right circumstances, it can be as much as 45 feet. And to that point, we haven't had any discussion around that. The revisions that are being presented, or we'll hear about from Mr. Cox here probably in a little bit, really don't do too much about this. It's not going to really help us. This is really the crux of being in a high relief area. We can't just take rules that were developed for level terrain and then apply them here. We have to think about it a different way. So that like Kevin says, is that, that we have the opportunity here or we should be no higher than 35 feet on the high side, but, that there's allowances for up to 10 feet on the other side, which would get you to 45 feet. And we do see cases where the walls here in Rolling Wood, some of them actually go close to 45 feet. So I think that's what we're looking at as far as making changes. Can we go to the next one? Okay, now this is Westlake Hills. This is taken straight out of their code. And they've got a 30-foot maximum, but they will give a certain amount of forgiveness up to 32 feet if the grade of what's being built on is greater than 25 feet. But it's a 32-foot maximum, still less than us. They use as their datum the natural grade. And their method for measurement is straight up and down. So you can take a plumb line and put it anywhere along the roof line and figure out where you are to get to your maximum height. Move up. In Aspen, Colorado, where they have a 25-foot maximum, they use a similar method for measuring to their building height, but they kind of focus on the perimeter of the building and make it 25 feet from the base of the building to the top. The datum is the lower of finished or natural grade. And when someone submits a request for a building permit, they have to include the both the finished and the natural grades in their application, so you can see how much the topography is going to change as a result of the building. Okay, next one. So I got these words from Pitkin County, which is in Colorado, and actually the county that Aspen is in. And the way they do their measurement is just a straight up and down plumb bob. Which I think would work very well in a hilly terrain. I think what that does for you is it as the terrain slopes downward, then the roof line slopes down with it. And that's all I had to say about that. Now I wanted to talk about sloping roofs. we permit both, we permit flat roofs here in Rolling Wood. And that works for the most part, but in some cases, we find that the flat roof building overwhelms the site. If you take the building height that we have today, 35 feet, and you insist on a pitch be applied to that roof, it softens the blow from the street. It actually harmonizes it a little bit better with the rest of the neighborhood. It makes it not seem quite as bulky. You don't lose a whole lot, you don't lose, whoops, excuse me. You don't lose much interior space, but you do lose some. But it just makes a more even presentation with regard to the rest of the neighborhood. You look around Rolling Wood and you'll find that there are an awful lot of roof lines that have a 312 pitch. That is, for every 3 inches, or for every 12 inches of horizontal space, there's a 3-inch height differential. It's pretty common, pretty popular. I'm sorry. It's my wife. Differential. Okay, so what I thought might be worth considering is that we consider that enforcing a pitched roof rule. If you go to the next slide, I took a random example of what a flat roofed house might look like. And if any of you might recognize this, this is the one that's on Park Hills. And you'll notice that because of its, because it has a flat roof, it looks monstrous. It's huge on the street. If you were to apply even the slightest grade to it, the 312 pitch, it would take almost 4 feet off of the front of the house. So I just wanted to put this in there as an example of what might happen with regard to using a pitch proof approach. That's it. What they've done in Aspen is they permit flat roofs, and they use their standard method for measuring what the height of that roof is, all the way up to a 312 pitch. So that a flat roof can't be higher than 28 feet, and a 312 pitch roof can't be higher than 28 feet at the ridge line. But if you increase the pitch of the roof, then they give you a break, and they allow you for pitches that are up to 712 to make your measurement to the midpoint between the eave and the ridge line. And if your slope is higher than 7/12, you can go 30% up the ridge line and make your mark there for maximum building height. And what that does is, again, it's a softer look. You're not necessarily losing interior space of the building. It's just easier on the eye and more fitting to the neighborhood. So I wanted to throw these things out because I think that some of the stuff we're talking about doesn't have enough variety in it. You know, we're kind of taking a sledgehammer and saying, well, we want to change this piece of code, and so what we're going to do is we're going to put this Band-Aid on the code, and that'll take care of it. And it doesn't really consider what the other possibilities are. So That's all I've got on this, but there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a whole world of code out there that other people have been thinking about. And, you know, if we're gonna be doing anything to our code, I think we need to have a look at it. Okay.
Appreciate that. It's
Yeah.
great stuff. Yeah.
So, I guess what we have before us is the revised.
So the item that you have before you is updated based on commentary provided at the last P&Z meeting. The major change is that we have struck the within a 5-foot horizontal distance. Right, we kind of talked about that at the meeting, and it was kind of decided like it's a bit arbitrary. Why is that really in there if everything else is direct line measurement adjacent to the foundation? So we struck that piece, and then we went ahead and just added a little clause at the end of the definition because there was some concern about making sure that we're tying this definition to the provisions in 10771 related to building height in the R residential zoning district. So we've just kind of added a statement to help reinforce that and also point people who may start with the definition before they see what the height requirement is, where they need to look for that. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So to be clear, the changes that we put in here are not changing the height, 30, 35, anything like that. It is clarifying that the way with which you measure, correct? In terms of like the measurement methodology effectively.
Yes, so, and I'll look to Ashley to correct me as I go awry here. I've slept since then, sorry everyone. So part of the reason this came before you originally was there was some concern with heights and some properties that came through. I believe there was a conversation with council to say, hey staff, let's tighten up how we're doing this measurement to make sure that it's consistent across the board. Ashley and I sat down and walked through it, provided language consistent with how staff has been interpreting this to really just remove the ability for it to be wishy-washy or anything like that and add clarity. This is not changing the current height in the code, which is actually not even in this section. It's in 10771 for residential districts. It's also not actually changing how staff is currently interpreting the measurement either. Just clarification.
And I assume staff's reviewed this and feels like it's helpful clarifying language.
I think what it's taken away is the 5 foot, right?
Right.
The 5 foot perimeter.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Is it appropriate to ask for any public comment?
Yeah. Does anybody have any public comment on this?
I'd like to be heard if I could. I'm Brian Ryder, 2906 Hatley, and the construction site used to be known as the City of Rollingwood. I've been here since 1984 and been active on various commissions, and I'm currently again on the Rollingwood Development Corporation Board. In my day job, I'm a law professor at the University of Texas teaching things like land use regulation, which is the world you're talking about. And I want just to say that you're dealing with height and you're dealing with setbacks in the prior discussion. To a man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And you made the comment that some of our neighbors feel like some of the houses being built overwhelm the site. When I first moved in here and built my home, and by the way, I have no dog in this fight, another Texasism, the reality was we all had septic systems, and we didn't have the value in the lots that we have today. And when a sewer system was built and prescribed, it became obvious to me that we would have problems like this at some point in the future. So I just want to remind you, within the context of talking about building height and the setbacks, that those are not the only tools available. You mentioned concerns about the house overwhelming the lot. That can be dealt with by a floor to area ratio, which says that if you've got a bigger lot, you can buy a bigger house. If you've got a smaller lot, you have to build a smaller house. The setbacks lines that you're dealing with, without some kind of other limitation, force things up. If people have a very valuable lot, they want to put a lot of house on it, the only requirements they have to comply with are height and the building setbacks, and they're going to fill that up. Now, you have some drainage issues with TCEQ and some other things go into this blend, but nevertheless, the program we have now that a prior council and a prior planning commission gave you to deal with, give you only those two tools, but not a floor to area ratio, not perhaps I think we're working on maybe a tree preservation ordinance, which is another way to look at what our neighborhood looks like, I mean, this is rolling wood. We need to be preserving our trees. At the same time, the words impervious cover had been mentioned in this discussion as another way of dealing with the proportionality of building size to lot size. That's another tool that is available to you in addition to height, in addition to your setbacks. And there are probably others that our planner here knows about. And the subject matter of building height needs to be discussed and dealt with. I'm not challenging that at all, but I am saying that you do need to deal with, in one or more of these meetings, a little bit more sophistication, I think, about use of different tools to achieve different things. Now, your good counsel will tell you that if you start stacking these things up too high, one on top of the other, you're going to get in a situation where somebody can't build at all. And that gets you into a legal problem, or it gets you into a Board of Adjustment issue where ordinances have to be adjusted to allow something there. And so there is no perfect solution to these things, folks. But I do want you to be aware and understand that you don't have just a hammer, and the problem is not just a nail. Questions that I can help you with?
I don't think so. I think that's great. I think that kind of, the summary of that is what kind of keeps bringing me back to the fact that we need a comprehensive, something similar to what was done on the commercial to tackle all of those things, because I think it's very worthwhile discussion to look at all of the different avenues you have to, govern what's going to be built and what the nature of the residential buildings in the neighborhood are going to look like.
Yeah,
And I think we have a really talented citizen base
Yeah,
that
you are making policy decisions, you are making aesthetic decisions. And sometimes those kind of concepts get a little bit soft as to being able to say, that's what I want. But, and then the Texas Local Government Code has some limitations in it. You can't prescribe the outside materials anymore of a house, which you used to be able to do, and things of that sort. So, but within the boundaries of what is out there to allow you to work with, there are additional tools and additional issues. And you do need, I think, finally, to address some of those in order to preserve the kind of neighborhood that we've all moved into, and I think probably want to preserve.
I think we're not professional planners, and haven't had the benefit of your whatever classes you're teaching. I'm sure it'd be probably
Well,
spot
I'm
on.
not a planner, though.
Okay.
I do have people from
But-
the community and regional planning program come over to my classes. I had 5 of those good folks this past semester. But I'm not a planner. This gentleman is the planner
Okay.
who
Yeah.
implements these things on a daily basis and on as applied to a particular site basis. I try to outline the area of law within which you can
Okay.
make some policy decisions and perhaps implement some of the aesthetic or judgment issues that you are called upon to advise the council on. You don't make these decisions. You're called on to advise the council, but this might be where it starts, or where it should start.
what I think the process has been that, you know, we look around at what's near us, and we look at the codes there, and we decide whether or not those would work better than what we have. And I don't think that that's necessarily a great way to do it. All it does is create inbreeding.
I don't know that you can avoid doing that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what
Yeah, that's fair.
as leaders of the community in this area, that's the kind of judgment you're trying to make.
Right.
The question becomes, then, what tools do you want to use? And that gets people irritated sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, we have people that say, I want to be able to use every damn square foot I have and every cubic square foot I have, and that's my right. And they'll be upset if you exercise the legal rights that the city has to use some of these other tools.
I guess my question to you would be, if we wanted to get educated on the things that you had just brought up, things like Florida area ratio, so on, how they're applied, how would we go about doing that?
City attorney?
Go to training. I mean,
Where would that
really,
be?
that's.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of training programs out there through the Texas Municipal League. The University of Texas has a land use program every year. I'm on the board that puts that program together. All sorts of training out there, and then of course, you know, people like Bryce can come in here and answer questions and assist and work you through those types of issues, because they are mostly planning in nature, and I'm not a planner either. I'm just a lawyer, and so you can use those planning tools within the context of what the law allows, and so it's a combination of those two things. But I would certainly encourage, like I encourage all my council members and my BOA members and planning and zoning members, if you have the time and if you want to serve on these types of committees, invest the time to go to the training to learn about it. And
Yeah.
there's plenty of opportunities out there to do it. Some free, some not.
Or there online kinds of seminars that these?
Yeah, I'm
folks
sure
could
that there are folks that do online seminars as well. I'm not aware of them, but I'm sure that they exist. But my point is really it's receiving training and education regarding
Right.
opportunities.
And again, understand the lawyers are simply going to draw the outside of the box of how you can use those tools.
Sure.
But somewhere, some judgment and policy decisions have to be made, and that is up to you.
Right.
But they can be used in a very surgical way, rather than just the hammer and the nail.
I guess my concern is that, you know, in previous meetings, we hear these comments that our building code was last revisited in 1981 or 1984, and it needs a complete revision. And you say, well, that sounds nice. Wonder who can do that, you know? And it's not the kind of thing that you would want to hand it off and say, well, revise this. So I'm just looking at trying to get smarter in this whole area before we start talking about this stuff. But thank you. Those were great comments. Thank you, Brian. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Ryan Clinton. I'm at 4714 Timberline Drive. And first of all, Chair, thank you very much for your presentation. The first thing I'm going to say is that I concede I have no background in this and no knowledge of it. I'm trying to crash course my way into it, and so I appreciate both your comments and the law professor's comments. I kind of assumed that the law professor just volunteered to chair the residential comprehensive planning process. So the other thing I want to admit is that it's kind of the wrong venue for my comments, but this is the venue that arises today, so I felt like I should be here. I don't plan to rebuild on my lot, so I'm not immediately invested, but that some of the proposals that have been floated, at least around, would render my lot unbuildable or comical in nature. My lot, I looked at the topography today, slopes 40 feet from the front to the back. So even under the current rules, I can barely build one story in the front of the lot. So a change that would take that 10 feet away, I think would make it unbuildable. or it would look like a waterfall of some sort with like 6 feet in the front and more in the back. Is it possible to put that back up there? The drawing that, I just want to show kind of what it looked like on my lot.
I think it's past that, yeah. That one.
Here. So this is the street in my lot, and you look down at the house.
Right.
And there's woods behind it and then BK's Road. So to make it so that this has to come down even further, and then it would slope down like this, I guess. There's no societal benefit to this slope. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't make the neighborhood more attractive. It doesn't help my neighbors for me to have a giant roof pitched in the back of my house. And so that's kind of, my only comment is that I feel like I don't know enough about it. I feel like we all need to learn a lot more about it. And there are known negative consequences to what we have now, which is the fear that everybody is talking about. But there are unknown negative consequences to just saying, all right, we're going to take away the 10 feet and just have it only be 35. So I totally agree with the comments that have been made that I would like to see a residential comprehensive planning process. I was on the first comprehensive planning process, and it took far too long. It did not need to take 18 months. Part of that was COVID, because we started right as COVID hit, and so everything got postponed. And then I think I've learned things through that process that could make it a lot faster. I would get rid of subcommittees and just make everybody hash through it as fast as possible, because if you wait on a subcommittee, the whole group could be delayed by a long, long time. I think that we have very talented people in the neighborhood. I think we have very diverse views. We know a lot of people that know a lot about it. I was just thinking, Chair, when you were speaking about Mike's house, I think is one of the most beautiful in the neighborhood, and to my knowledge, it doesn't have a pitched roof, right? So, I mean, I just think that we have to think through that, because his is quite stunning, in my opinion, and it's not something we would not want to have in our neighborhood. And so my overall suggestion is that we slow down just a little bit, take the time to use the expertise that we have in the community, as became obvious today, and have a process that creates as much public discussion and buy-in, so that at the end of it, what you get is something like we did with the comprehensive planning process. Because the only people that criticize the comprehensive plan that was adopted are people who haven't read it. Once people read it, they're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it was because we did a robust discussion with our community, and we brought in experts, and we brought in people that disagreed with us, and we brought in people that just wanted to build, and we brought in people that didn't want to build anything, and together we came up with a consensus compromise. Thanks.
I just wanted to make one comment about this, is that I think what I was talking about really was if we had a straight up and down measurement approach to this, rather than this being squared off here, this would all come down this way.
Agreed.
And then we would have like possibly multiples.
Totally agree. I just don't see how that benefits anybody, or we have a stair-stepped backyard or a giant slanted.
Hey, Dave, I'm sorry. People at home probably can't hear you without there being a microphone.
That's as much as I got.
Okay.
That's all I wanted.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
If I might, Brooke Brown, 307 Nixon. Here is, I think this is a good discussion, and I thank you, Ryan. And your house backs up to a wooded area, so there's no property below you. I think the other side of the concern is where there's a house across the street from the low point, or backs up to the low point here, and that house, their roof, they have to deal with this 45-foot wall at present. So that's the other side of the concern, is where our current building code doesn't take into account the impact on someone on the property below the slope or at the bottom of the slope. And so we're having situations where that impact removes all privacy from their backyard and has other consequences in terms of drainage that our code doesn't currently adjust for. And so that's the other side of it. I just want to bring that up. There are ways people can deal with this, I'm sure. I think we have someone in the room that might be able to advise us on that too, but.
I'm Duke Garwood. We live at 5 Rockway Cove. So that's my 4th house in Rollingwood. And as Brother Ryder, I've been around, we've been here since '85. I really didn't plan on saying anything. I would say that, you know, look, we do have a drainage ordinance. You know, that's another tool in the toolkit, and it's a significant piece in the puzzle to deal with. So just be mindful of that. You know, I'm just gonna kind of go off, all right? And I'm probably come from the property rights position, but at the same time, as an architect, I'm trained in the conservation world. Let's make it green. Let's make it sustainable. Let's do what's sensitive. Let's do what's a good design. And that's obviously a very subjective kind of discussion. So I'm really conflicted by a lot of this personally. And, you know, none of y'all know me from Adam, but hey, I've been on the Parks Commission, and I only did that so long until I was asked to revise the master plan 7 times because I was the architect and I could draw, and I said, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. So, no, that was Bill Hamilton that did that to me. So, been on the P&Z, you know. Brian and I have been in every position in Little League Baseball, so we've been on that course. Been president of the Basketball League twice. So, you know, I'm telling you that. So I've been involved and been around the block with this. I've probably done 12 houses in Rollingwood as an architect over, you know, since '84 to doing one currently right now. And I mean, you know, I'm not here to speak for my client, but they're going to be pretty upset if there's a moratorium. I'll just say that outright because we've spent a significant amount of time and energy to do it right and to do it well, and not say it's going to be a reasonably sized house relative to what happens, I'll say, on a fairly normal basis. But I feel like we've done a really conscientious job in that respect, and they're going to be really upset with a moratorium. So I'm just saying that. So look, for these, you know, I think the comparative approach is really important. It's a good one. I would say, man, anytime we compare ourselves to Westlake Hills, that's a terrible thing to do. Well, I mean, it's a different community. It's different lot sizes. Right. You know, hey, you want to go, oh, they got a 25% impervious coverage limitation, but they have an incentive program. Yeah. You get up to the upper 30s, low 40s pretty quick. Yeah. Okay, it's not difficult. It's a reasonable challenge, but you know, there's a lot of things about that don't make for good comparisons unless we want to take that approach. I'm not opposed to that. Dave, I like your idea, you know, some of the thoughts about the roof design, okay? And I'll just say this about impervious coverage because, you know, that's one that somebody also, I think Kevin Glasheen said the city of Austin's 40%. It's not, it's 45%, okay? And what happens if we impose an impervious coverage limitation, we're going to get smaller footprints and we're going to get, you know, up to the max, whatever we set those heights at, what have you. And it's going to be flat roofs, okay? Mm-hmm. Nothing against flat roofs, done them all day long. And again, just so you know, my practice is 60% commercial, 40% residential. So in the world of Mr. Ryder, that box, I'm used to working inside of it. It's not a problem. Just give us the rules. We'll do it. But, you know, I just say that publicly about impervious coverage. If you get really restrictive about that, we're going to have the same stuff all over. And if you like it, great. If you don't, you're not going to be happy. And again, I mean, we can legislate design as much as you want. Look, City of Austin, I mean, we've probably all heard of the term the McMansion ordinance. That's their way for trying to, that's their way of trying to legislate design, try to not have existing houses get overwhelmed by big new houses. The FAR, as Brian mentioned, is a real important floor area ratio. So a percentage of your lot, that's your maximum square footage, you know, heated and cooled, however you want to define it. There's a lot of ways to do that. But it's a great, I think it's a great attempt. I don't know that City of Rollingwood can do that because we don't have the staff to review it and approve it. We don't have the staff to enforce it. And it's really complicated. You know, my clients, they look at it and go, oh my gosh, we need an architect immediately, or a math science, you know, professor to figure out. But basically you're defining a tent that you work within based on setbacks, based on articulation. Like I say, that's a big key to a lot of the effort to create some design features and interest is the articulation aspect. Whereas if we do impervious coverage without articulation, we're going to have square boxes that are extremely vertical.
And the reason I'm standing here with my old friend is that he's right in the sense that you're building a balloon, and if you push on one side, you know, something gives on the other, or there's certainly a pressure to do so. And so I wasn't advocating for the use of all of these tools. I was trying to educate as to the array of tools that are available to implement what you make some design standards for.
No, and he laid it out well.
Designed, and as the chair of the Rollingwood Development Corporation at the time, I handled the building of the pavilion that's right back here, which I think.
That one.
That way, yeah, okay. Yeah. Wherever the pavilion is, that is hugely popular in the playscape now. So those are the things that we have done for the city. So you can, I just want to mention that so you can see his work.
Oh.
I don't have a problem with anything he's built, other than it's too damn expensive.
So I've lived, you know, in the northeast corner, the closest house to the clubhouse. I've lived in the house closest to McDonald's. So I told people, hey, we moved across the city, about 2 minutes away. But I appreciate what this gentleman said.
Sure.
You know, one of our lots was 38 feet of fall from front to back. But the whole, you know, as an architect, hey, we stepped and worked with that slope and tried to minimize that impact and all that good stuff. But hey, it's hard to legislate good design, trust me. Look, impervious coverage also, I mean, like I say, the offset of that to me is we've got the drainage ordinance. You know, I know one of the issues about impervious coverage is, yes, let's create more green space. We have good, in my world, good setbacks. City of Austin's 25 foot, ours is 30. Rear yard's 10, ours is 20. Our side yards are accumulation of 25 feet, theirs are 15, okay? And again, that's a comparison. I think City of Austin's a reasonable comparison as well. You know, so hey, our setbacks are good, in my opinion. I think your effort to define some of those things that can kind of get out of control, I'm all for it. I mean, you know, in my world, roof overhangs are good, you know? If you have a flat roof and you have a sheer flat wall, you know, it's okay as long as it's built just extremely well and assembled perfectly. Otherwise, you're asking for a lot of problems. But, you know, as I tell people, I say, when you go outside and it's raining, don't you take a raincoat and maybe an umbrella? So overhangs are good. You know, building heights. I mean, You know, originally, our building height was 30 feet.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my houses, my neighbor insisted that the city that I provide a survey of the building height. And I told my surveyor, as long as it starts with a 2, we're good. Came out 29.6. But again, Dave, what you presented with regards to some of the incentives on the design options relative to roofs, I think that's a reasonable approach. Okay.
That mitigates the pressure of trying to get absolutely
That's right.
the most volume you can.
Yeah.
Which is, again, what you're forced into with the Port Area ratio without some of these other tools.
Right, exactly.
Look, everything else that I would say would be a repetition of what Brian already mentioned, that there are all those tools that are available. And, you know, again, FAR, if you're not familiar with the McAnshin ordinance, you can look at it. Again, the whole intent was an attempt to protect the original fabric of a neighborhood that's going through transitional growth like we are. And, you know, it's a fairly successful approach.
Thanks, Stu. Very good. Do we have any other comments on this?
I had one question that's come up in the last couple of meetings that I think isn't dealt with in the language we have here. There's been a couple of people, I think, on the city council that have brought up issues with the measure, again, not the absolute height, but the measurement concept here, that there's been some gaming the system of foundation heights relative to, I guess, some of the native ground versus finished grade. I haven't gotten a good feel for how that system is being gamed. I don't know if you would have any insight into that, and I think I'm right that this doesn't address that in any way, and is that something we need to be talking about in this larger discussion?
The curious thing about our current ordinance is that unlike virtually every other height ordinance around the world, it goes for the higher of option. If there's something that needs to be measured, it goes for the higher of the two options, which is really kind of odd. It's like the whole ordinance was developed or designed to ensure we could get the maximum building height at 35 feet, maximum, you know.
So I guess maybe to simplify my question with our diagram we have here,
Yeah.
if that's, you know, the appropriate measurement as we currently have it drawn, is there the ability to lift that whole thing onto a higher foundation and then have the absolute height higher?
Wasn't
Is that-
that the
Not-
goal of
not
adding
as- not
this
as-
language of original native ground surface, right? That there would be a survey taken before and that would effectively fix?
But the language has original native ground surface already in it,
Yeah,
so I guess I'm
that's
trying
right.
to figure out what
That's-
people have said that that's another thing that's being used to
Game.
even increase above and beyond the 35 or 45 foot, and I haven't had a good feel whether that's an accurate comment or not.
I don't read the ordinance to allow that. You don't.
I don't see how
You can build yourself any nice pyramid you want and put a little cut up on top of it as long as you stay under the plane that is defined by our 35 foot above the reference point.
Yeah,
So when you
I
drive
think-
around and you see homes that are on
Yeah, that 8 or 10 foot.
lots that slope from front to back up, and that does create a house that looks bigger than if the one next door were in reverse.
Yeah.
And some of them you'll see a really large foundation before the the floor space starts. But so I guess what we're saying is if we were to go measure that, if it's been implemented properly, from the ground to the top of that should not be more than 45 feet in any scenario.
That's right.
I think we kind of fixed it with the,
The 5 feet buffer.
no, I think that was
Okay.
just cleaning up an oddity, but changing grade on the end of 1 to adjoining original native ground surface enabled someone not to try to game it and build a wall and then put dirt higher against the low side in order to stay under 10 feet to take the measurement from,
Right.
you know. But it does beg the question, you could sort of, maybe you should say the higher of there because someone could just go cut it out, I guess, at this point, and then it would end up being higher than 45 theoretically, perhaps.
If you start with an as-built survey, shouldn't be able to gain it.
Well, but someone could, if say you were 10 feet, right? Someone could come in and cut so that the original grade was here. You could go and cut 5 more feet on the low side, the way we've got it drafted, and then instead of a 45-foot wall, you got 50 feet.
But if we're going with the original relief, yeah, if we go with the original,
So if I can help
I
us out here.
understand that.
Yeah.
I get that, but that gives you that gives you the ability to measure from the high side, right? It doesn't mean that you can't go back and cut the low side. You follow me?
So if you cut too low, then you hit that 10-foot provision, which then pushes you back into low point plus 10 feet. So you can't indefinitely cut that. 45 feet is going to be the tallest it can be.
I get
As
that,
far-
but I don't think it works that way. The way it's
As
set up.
far as where is it measured and can I just lift my foundation and get away with that? It's a measurement from grade. So whether you choose to have pier and beam foundation or slab on grade foundation, it's the exact same measurement. When we look at things that are built into slopes, and you've got that kind of what I'll call that remainder area on your downslope or your upslope, depending on which way your house faces. However you choose to treat that is counting against your overall height, right? So if I leave it open and I just have pier and beam foundation, that's counting against it. If I fill it in and I do slab on grade, but I just have this tall wall forward of the slab, that counts against your height. So it's not a finished floor to top of roof measurement. It's a grade to top of building measurement. Does
Thank
that
you, yes.
clarify
I
your concern?
don't agree, but it doesn't matter for tonight. We're going to talk about it again.
yeah. I am, yeah. I am wondering, even whenever we go through a comprehensive plan, how we turn that comprehensive plan into these words, So.
I'm an amateur at Brook Brown 307 Nixon Drive. I've been here since 1980. But as I've thought about this, and I've thought about it for 10 months now, I think we know we know the look of Rolling Wood. We're not always intentionally conscious of it. But we know the look of Rolling Wood, and people choose Rolling Wood because they like the look of Rolling Wood. We know Westlake looks different. We know Hyde Park looks different. We know Zilker looks different. And so I think you to have a happy medium, you've got to decide what are those features of the building code that preserve the current sense of community for this community. And that's a hard thing to do, but I truly think that's what it is. And I think part of the angst that we have now is we have this sense of openness and, trees, and we're not bundled up together like you would be in Hyde Park. And we're not as rugged as you'd be in Westlake. And so, to me, what we're trying to preserve is some sense of community, the sense of community of why people choose Rolling Wood and are here today. And what is creating part of the community issue is that these, if you've had a bigger lot or you've had a lot with a slope, then you had a smaller house because you didn't have enough room for a septic tank. We all know that. Now you can build on it. And so that sense of openness is being pushed on by these larger homes. That doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad. It does change the character of the neighborhood, and it changes the character of your neighbor. And so, we all like to have high property values, but if your neighbor is doing something that, that impacts your livability and your privacy, then is that good? Is that good for the community? If you're the neighbor being imposed upon, and that could happen too. So I think we've just got to keep a large view of what we're doing here while we're doing it, and make sure that we're staying within the parameters of what this community wants. And I think it's a difficult job, but it's, you either do it or you don't preserve what you have. So that's my comment.
Makes sense, bro. And I just think it's, after hearing all of this, right, I just think it's so important that we do this holistically.
Mhm.
I just think doing this, I mean, everything, two of the most qualified, a lawyer and architect opinions that I've heard in I think I'm the lowest tenured person on here, but thank you both for that, plus living in the neighborhood. So I think the commonality of everything we've heard is don't do this piecemeal. Look at all the tools that you have available to you and address this holistically. And I feel like I know we're going to talk about process and how we do this in another agenda, but I just feel like some Band-Aids are important, but I think Band-Aids can quickly start to get into, okay, now what's the next set of Band-Aids, next set of Band-Aids, next set of Band-Aids, and all of a sudden we've made really material sweeping changes to the code without having the holistic view. And I guess that's my big concern that I'm
Okay.
trying to avoid here.
Well, I'm going to, and I don't disagree with you.
Yep.
I think you're right. It would be ideal to take the holistic approach to the whole thing, but I sense impatience at City Council, and I'm afraid that something will happen that we wish didn't. So, and it's not a bad idea to show up at City Council and tell them so.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I know, I don't want to impose.
Right.
But from the city council's point of view, we've been hearing about the misuse of projections for a while now, and that will continue unless we do put a Band-Aid on it. And I think if we put a Band-Aid on it, we do it with a commitment that we're going to look at this holistically. But, under Texas law, at the moment you file your application, that law is what governs your permit. So we'll have if you see on your, on the dais, there's a handout of how many applications are currently pending. And those will be handled under existing law. The only thing, there is a benefit, I think, in dealing with and setting that reference point, the height datum reference, in a way that can be used consistently and can help us enforce that part of the code. I think that's important. I think doing the thing on projections shouldn't be that impactful to someone who wants to have, is putting in a home that's respectful of privacy and things like that. So I think we need to do those two things in an more immediate way, and we have been talking about this since since this past May at the council level. So
one thing
That's
that
all.
I heard at the last city council meeting was there are at times special situations that require special governance, and you heard this too.
I'm sorry, I didn't
That
hear.
is, we can write an ordinance that says, in general, these things, okay? This is what Rowanwood does. But behind that ordinance, or as an addendum to that ordinance, we can also say, for this specific address, we can do this. It goes beyond what we have here in the general. I hate to do that, okay? But just knowing that exists makes me feel a little bit better about anything we do.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we have a variance process.
Yes.
We have
Well,
a
I wonder what that is.
obviously we have a variance process too.
Yeah. So, I agree with you. I think at the very least, I think we ought to be thinking about Band-Aids, because I don't want,
Yep.
I don't want a bigger hammer than the one we're using to come down on us.
Thank you for indulging me.
Duke Garwood again,
Yeah.
5 Rockaway Cove. I mean, there's an existing ordinance related to our drainage ordinance, our drainage requirements for each permit. And I think it's important, I mean, there hasn't been very much discussion about it, but man, y'all know the intent of that.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna express what I understand philosophically, that, you know, hey, you tear down a house, you can't exceed the runoff that was there previously with whatever mitigation you choose, whether that's detention, rainwater harvesting, yada, yada, yada. There's other pieces to that puzzle. Or if it's a vacant lot, same thing. You can't exceed the runoff that was currently there. And I mean, I dare anybody to find more drainage mitigation than what I just did at 5 Rockaway Cove. It's about $300,000 worth. And I was happy to do it, okay? But I think it's important in light of, I'm saying this in light of the impervious coverage issue, that those two things, you know, kind of go hand in hand. If we come up with a impervious coverage limitation, we may need to rethink the drainage ordinance, okay? And I'm just saying that, you know, if we say, oh God, we need an impervious coverage limitation, then we go, well, gee whiz, maybe our drainage ordinance isn't as good as we think it is. And I personally, at least my experience is, again, 4 houses, I only had to do it once, because I got in before the gate was closed before on the other houses. But hey, what house has 3 detention ponds?
Yeah.
I got them. Okay.
You know, this hasn't really, this isn't really on the table yet, this impervious cover. And I know I'm planning to be at the next council meeting, all right? And largely because of what I'm seeing so far in the, what's it called, the billboard or the, but yeah, I'm concerned about it too. We do have a drainage ordinance, and we do have TCEQ requirements that have to be met, and you know, taken together, they're pretty tough.
Yeah.
And that drainage ordinance was put in place not all that long ago.
Not that
and
long
with
ago.
Great deal of discussion
So,
and
yeah.
research and engineering, and et cetera. And I think a lot of these Band-Aids are really good for a lot of reasons, and thinking through all these things is really good for a lot of reasons, but it does, people keep coming in front of us and mentioning drainage. And I keep coming back to, you know, is the drainage manual that we just put in place not all that long ago broken? I hear from,
Yeah.
you know, I've gone through design on a couple of houses, and I hear from architects and engineers that Rollingwood has an incredibly robust drainage requirement that I know costs a lot of money, but at least in isolation on the lots does a really good job. So I guess I hear kind of differing perspectives on that. And again, I think that's a good reason to discuss all of that holistically in a large process.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of things. Is there any other discussion around at least the building height issue here? Okay,
I think this seems to be, you know, kind of what we talked about,
all right.
in my view.
I think I changed my mind, and I think I'm a little nervous about doing it. I think Ryan's comment was good, in that, I don't know, I'm happy to do the other one, but I feel like trying to do height as a Band-Aid is very dangerous.
Okay.
And is that, I guess I definitely don't understand the height measurements in the way an architect or a builder or engineer that's worked in the city does far from it. I guess my perspective or my understanding of these changes was that it was clarification in nature. I guess you have concerns that it maybe not necessarily that.
That and I'm also just concerned that let me pull it up, but you know, I guess in theory, and it's a question for council, but we've talked about changes that I think are kind of common sense, but I think, you know, I didn't know there were lots of slope 40 feet, you know, and so that's sort of like, wow, look, what does that do to people? But I think more so it's that, what if we send this to council and it comes back and saying the ground surface is not more than 1 foot above the lowest? Then effectively, we just backdoored ourselves into lowering the height 9 feet or whatever. And I think we open that potential by
Kind of going back to some of the
addressing
discussion we had at the last
And
meeting,
then-
yeah.
And then it's like, well, great, you know, what have we done? And I don't think I think that could impact a lot of people. I mean, look at all these permits, you know, I guarantee you that it's gonna affect half of them, probably. And I'm not saying that that would happen, but it could. But it could.
And are you talking about the 107.71 section or the definition? Because
Talking.
That, by the way, is one of the reasons I was asking if we could see what went out.
Well, right.
in
I
the
mean, I think
mailer.
we tried
Yeah.
I think we tried to fix it, you know, with the qualifier at the end, but weren't thinking about the 10 feet in item 1 could theoretically get changed to 1 foot.
right. So and so I guess just to clarify, what went out on that postcard is basically today's items, just in a public hearing form. So today they're in discussion. The only item that is, noticed for building height is 107.3, the definition. So we heard that out the last P&Z meeting. There wasn't clarity on what to do with 107.7. And so this is simply the definition that kind of clears up how we're doing it now. This wouldn't be noticed to make changes to 107.71.
I'd have to go read 107.71, but if 107.3 says not more than 10 feet, and we send that up to council,
Sure.
they could change that to not more than 1 foot, correct?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
My understanding is that council can do anything they want to, anything we do anyway. You know,
Well,
we are a
but-
recommendation body.
But we've had
And
a
that's
whole, almost everybody that spoke has said, we'd like to do this comprehensively.
Sure,
And
that's
I
right.
feel like
Yep.
the overhang is, you know,
Yep. And I'm
I
gonna
think
do,
that's good. I
I'm
think
gonna
it's
do my
simple.
best to make sure that city council knows that that's what we heard tonight.
Yeah, but I think
That's
that, yeah, I mean,
that's
I
what
like
we
that
heard.
Band-Aid. I don't think this is,
Yep,
it's a Band-Aid if it's approved as we send it up,
yep.
but, you know, is that gonna happen?
I have another process question. So that's a good point. If we said we're not prepared to do anything as it relates to building height right now, we don't take action, at the next meeting with a public hearing, what are city council's ability to, I've heard mention of super majorities and whatnot. Is there any process for them to say, planning and zoning didn't make any recommendation, didn't send anything to us on building height, we're gonna go do it anyway? Is there the ability to do that?
No. The remedy is that they remove the planning and zoning commissioners who don't perform their ministerial obligation to make a recommendation to city council pursuant to their obligations under the ordinance, which is to make recommendations to city council.
When
When requested by city
yeah.
council. And also when someone comes in and makes a zoning request. Any process. Unlike zoning board of adjustment members, planning and zoning members can remove for any reason, good reason, bad reason, no reason.
I've heard that a lot lately.
but not,
Yeah.
but, I'm just telling you the law.
No,
With-
no,
the law-
I know.
And the law
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
planning and zoning board adjustment, planning and zoning members, can be removed for any reason.
I think that I'd like to go forward with, next month's meeting and get more public input. Ensure that city council knows that, we've been hearing more from the public about a more holistic approach to this. Ask for
That can be-
patience.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. That can absolutely be part of your overall report to city
Right,
council,
yeah.
right? That
Sure.
This is our recommendation
Yeah.
with respect to this specific ordinance.
Yep.
However, as part of that recommendation or report, we believe maybe this should be, postponed until more holistic. You can put all of that in your
You bet.
report.
Good.
And I would remind folks that, just like city council can remove planning and zoning members, the citizens can remove council members. So it's all a part of a bigger process.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm sensing a certain amount of frustration at city council level, and what you said is absolutely true, and we probably should do that. But I just don't know that the patience will be there for it, that recommendation. But in any case, I think that we ought to take this forward and let the public know that these are the things that are being considered, and let folks weigh in on them and say, at least in a forum like this. And so, what do you think? It's great that we're hearing that, some of these changes won't work. And, or some of these considerations won't work. Maybe don't change anything. So,
I think also, Dave, our recommendation will be to have a more robust process than folks showing up to a city council meeting and providing their thoughts at the city council meeting. Something more akin to the commercial process that was undertaken, which is much more robust than the normal process of show up to a public hearing and state your opinion. Correct?
yes, Brooke, we have talked about doing a comprehensive. Who needs to kick that off? How's that happen?
I think the council needs to adopt the funding for it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
come up with
Yeah.
what kind of committee or planning process there is and what topics are included.
Sure.
We brought that up at the last 2 or 3 meetings, I think including the joint meeting. Has there been, I've watched bits and pieces of the past council meetings, but has there been any formal discussion yet about a larger process akin to the
Not a,
commercial?
I think that'll happen in January or February.
I think just in case nobody else, I think it's been so important, I think the answer was not yet, but
Yeah.
at the January, February meeting is likely when that'll take place.
Could that happen? Can you make sure that happens?
I can,
Would you?
yes. I will consult with, that's Councilmember Hudson's project, so I will consult with her on that and we'll make sure she understands.
Look at that, we're planning.
And I guess to, hearing your concern, I mean, where we stand now, we had discussion of these items,
Yeah.
which I think we've basically wrapped up tonight.
I think so.
We've already mailed out public notices, so these will be on our next agenda for discussion and possible action. And that time we will have discussion and possible action, and I guess we'll just have to figure out what we want to do then.
I think so. Well, I feel better. All right. Okay, very good. Okay. Do we have any more discussion? All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All right. It is.
Thank you again to everybody. That was
Yeah.
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 tremendously
Thanks
helpful.
for everyone coming
Really
out.
appreciate it.